Welcome to the Chicano Chronicles, and I'm your host, Emiliano Villa. Today, the Chicano has a voice. Starting today, the Chicano will have a venue from which to speak, to be heard, and yes, to be seen. But how did the Chicano become America's new slave culture? You know, those people that do those jobs that white people will not do. You've heard the sound bites thousands of times. That's you. But how do we devolve to that level? The Spaniards invaded Aslan, and they used biological warfare, pretty much decimate our culture, our people, an entire habitat of culture that it was not European, it was indigenous to this country. And once they used biological warfare to decimate us, in 1521, they took over Aslan, they took over Mexica. And at that point, the Mexican people, the Chicano, the Mexicano, we became slaves. We became a subjugated people. And once you become a subjugated person, once you become a subjugated people, you can no longer become the kings or queens of that people. You can no longer become the clergy. You can no longer become a wise man or a counselor. Those jobs were taken from us. The only thing that we could do after that, because Spaniards now held those positions, Cortez was now the governor of what they called Hispania or New Spain. And that's where the Hispanic people come from. The descendants of Cortez and Malinche, the legacy that was left of that invasion, and the people that were born of that union between Cortez and La Malinche, those people are called Hispanics, and they will take this position of a slave, of a Spanish slave, to today, to 2024. Hispanic knows that he is a conquered person. He's a slave to the European American, and that's why you'll see a lot of Hispanics calling themselves that, because they know that will give them position as well as a Latino, right? We know that Latino is a language. The Latin language was created in 680 BC by the Roman Empire, the Italians, and then they try to convince us, or they did convince us, to call us Latinos. Mexicanos call themselves Latinos a lot. People from South and Central America like the word Latino. They like being called a language because that shows their subjugation, and they know if they admit and they become a slave to that subjugation, they'll get opportunity by their European American bosses and their handlers, right? But there are some of us who don't claim Hispanic. Yo soy Chicano. I come from a place called Mexica, the Mexican people. And I was not a conquered people. My sangre is not diluted. I am puro Chicano. I have no Spanish blood in me. Now, that could be an argument, right? Because yes, we know that we've been diluted by the Spanish bloodline, right? They've diluted and tainted our pure blood. And so that's where you get the Hispanic and the Latino. I have to tell you that you have to psychologically tell yourself that you are neither of those, that you're not a conquered people. And everything that has transpired after 1521 is psychological, people. We carry a lot of psychological scars. The most profound of those scars I call the competition for crumbs, because now that we can no longer become kings and queens, princes and princesses, we now got to vie for the slave foreman. That's the Chicano foreman that is now going to have to tell the Chicano slaves what to do and where to go, because that's what colonization does, is the colonizers use their own people to now start managing the slave culture. So our highest position that we could vie for at that point was to become that foreman, that underling, and we would work right under our white supervisors or bosses or whatever you want to call them. But that was it. And now to become a foreman or to become a leader of the slave community, you had to compete for that position. It was not just given to you. So that's where the competition for crumbs now. So now we're not competing for being kings, we're competing for being slaves. So that's the competition that we've been fighting for, is the crumbs that fall off the tables. We've been fighting for the positions that will give us a little bit more bread, a little bit more crumbs. That is the competition for crumbs. And guess who that competition is between? It is between brothers. It's between sisters. It's between Chicanos. So that's how the Chicano the psychological scar of self-hatred, it's thousands of years of subjugation, Chicano. It just didn't happen overnight. So the self-hatred that you experience of Chicanos hating Chicanos, Mexicanos hating Chicanos, Latinos hating Chicanos, Latinos hating Hispanics, Hispanics hating Mexicans, it is a big round cycle of hate. And that's what happens when you can only compete for the crumbs. That's what happens when you become a slave culture. So understand that mentality, people. And we're still fighting that fight today. You know, we can't become the president of America. That's out of our reach. We got very few, if any, politicians. They call themselves Hispanic and Latino because they know that they have no political life if they call themselves Chicano, Chicana. So they call themselves these names so that they can be allowed to be quasi successful, right? We don't got no billionaires. There's not you can't show me a Chicano billionaire. That's not happening in America. You go to Mexico, and there's the richest man in the world at some point, and he was a Jewish Mexican. So there's a lot of things going on with Mexico that we have to talk about. But right now we're talking about America, porque Chicano is an American phenomenon. It's not Mexican. It happened here in this country by our Chicano leadership, Corky Gonzalez, and those men that fought for the Chicano movement. And we're about out real quick. I mean, it didn't last long. So we have to understand that, you know, the reason that we're fighting each other, the self-hatred that exists, and we all know it exists. That's not even a question. If anybody tells you that the Chicano isn't his own worst enemy, they're selling you something, and they they're usually in a position that the white establishment will put them in, and they want to maintain that position. That's they've made it to their spot, right? And they're going to do their best to keep the Chicano down and do their job as best as they can, just like an overseer. If we go back to the template of the African American community, they did the same thing. When they needed to catch a black slave, they usually used black men to do it. When they needed a whip or they needed to manage the black slave, they usually used white or black people to do it, right? It wasn't all just white people. So that pattern has grown, and it's metastasized into what we're seeing today. So we'll talk about that a little later. So we have to understand, Chicano, how did we get here? How did we become America's new slave culture? What is that? Did I just say that? Yeah, America's new slave culture, people. This is who we've become. We do the jobs that white people will not do. We're the maids now. It's not black people no more. The black slave culture, it still exists, but not in the way you think. America's manual labor, that mantle has fallen to brown people. And now when you see people picking cotton, it's not cotton anymore, it's agriculture. So now we're picking potatoes, tomatoes, strawberries. And the people that are picking those, they're brown people. They're Chicano, they're Mexicano, they're you and they're me. Wake up, people. This is who we've become. We've become America's new slave culture, without a doubt. Now, you're going to start saying and playing semantics. Oh, well, those are Mexicans. No, the rest too. Just because you're a union construction worker and you're making some good money, that doesn't mean that you're not a slave. You're breaking your back for that money, Chicano, guaranteed. Because why? Because I do construction. I have a construction company. I know what entails a manual labor. Okay, so I'm there. So if you think that, oh, soy chingon, I got a union job and I'm making, however many dollars an hour, so that doesn't mean I'm a slave, you're wrong. Okay, you're just a well-paid slave. Okay, remember, Harriet Tubman, leader of the Underground Railroad, when asked, how many slaves did you save in your lifetime, Mrs. Tubman? She told that reporter, she says, I could have saved more had they known they were slaves. In other words, she said that even black slaves didn't realize that they were slaves. So you can imagine brown people who have jobs and cars and houses, they can't see themselves as slaves. They think they made it. Oh, I used to work in Mexico for 2 pesos a day. Now I'm making $75 an hour, $45 an hour, union wages. That's good money. So yeah, you tend to start thinking, yeah, I'm doing good. Not in America. Not in America. Today in America, we got men worth hundreds of billions of dollars. So don't think for 1 minute that your, $1 million existence, which if you're not worth $1 million today, something's wrong. If you don't got a 500, 600, $7,000 house, something's wrong. If you don't got two, three cars, something's wrong. If you ain't got a vacation home or somewhere where you vacation, something's wrong. But even if you have that, please don't think that you're rich. Please don't think that you've made it. Not in America. Because being rich in America today, that means you're worth $1 billion. Being rich in America today, that means you have $50 million. Being rich in America today, that means you're a multi-millionaire. So unless you're a multi-millionaire, Chicano, stop thinking that you're a Republican. Stop thinking that you're rich, because you're not. Tú sabes. This is the propaganda that we've been made to experience. Now, let's talk about propaganda, because that's what made us become the slave culture, that propaganda. But when did this propaganda start? Well, Nazi Germany teaches us that propaganda was a very important tool in subjugating the Jewish community. Okay, they had to teach Germans to hate Jews. They had to teach Germans how to be murderers and killers in a level that had never before been seen in the world, in humanity. A concentrated extermination of a specific people. Never before in the history of mankind has that been done. And the way it was done and achieved was through propaganda. So now we're seeing propaganda in America that, and we're seeing the crazy people that are coming out of that. The killings, the school shootings, the batshit crazy ideals that white people have. The way they talk, nonsense, utterly nonsense. Defending a president or an ex-president that is a liar, that is the worst of humanity. That's propaganda. But how did propaganda start in America? We're gonna talk about that today, right? So propaganda in America started in 1987 when Ronald Reagan abolished the Fairness Doctrine. In 1987, Ronald Reagan abolished the Fairness Doctrine. What was the Fairness Doctrine? Well, it was regulations stating that if you were going to report the news, you had to do it evenly. You had to present both arguments. There had to be fairness, right? You couldn't lie. We know what we know what the reality is today. Fox News shows us what you can do in terms of fairness, right? So that's what Ronald Reagan did. He's allowed somebody like the Fox News Corporation or Rupert Murdoch, and again, understand that Rupert Murdoch, Joseph Goebbels, who was the propaganda minister in Nazi Germany circa 1940s, they pretty much are the same thing, serving the same purpose. It's a national media service, a propaganda machine of a country, right? And that's what Ronald Reagan allowed. Is he allowed for truth to go out the window and for propaganda to come in the front door. And that's what we're seeing today. Is you can lie, you can say anything you want, you can only present one side of any argument, and that's the way America is today. Okay, we've seen this before. So it was Ronald Reagan who created this ability to lie in a mass scale. That's called propaganda, and we're seeing it now. So that propaganda has been instrumental in making the Chicano be America's new slave culture. Okay, a lot of propaganda went into to convincing Chicanos to be Republican, right? To vote against their own best interest. A lot of propaganda went into making Chicanos agree with making brown people illegal once they came across the Mexican border. A lot of propaganda went into that. A lot of propaganda is going into politics nowadays because white people have realized that they're losing their political power. So Democrats and Republicans, those are no longer two parties, people. That's one party. It's a white political party, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to conserve, or they're trying to perpetuate and elongate white supremacy. So Democratic, you look at Nancy Pelosi, right, and she has reigned over the most impotent Congress to ever grace the face of the earth. She's allowed the Republicans to run roughshod over American politics while she stood by and made sure that she stopped anything from happening in terms of democratic evolution. So gerrymandering, the Republicans have run roughshod. They've gerrymandered to the third degree, while the Democratic Party stood by impotent. Appointing judges, the Republican Party through Donald Trump has appointed so many judges that it's going to take millennia to undo that. And the Democratic Party and Nancy Pelosi stood by while this happened. They capitulated in what the Republican Party was doing. Better wake up, people, because this is this is going on right in front of our face, and we're not even seeing it. So all these things that the Republicans are doing, these very smart wizard Republicans, and then the dumb Democrats, right? The uneducated Democrats are just allowing the Republicans to run roughshod over them. We're losing our voting rights. We're losing our civil rights. We're losing our reproductive rights. We're losing everything. And the Democratic Party is supposed to be the smart people. They're supposed to be the college educated people. Those are supposed to be the elites. And yet they're being run over in every aspect of politics. It's propaganda, Chicano. So wake up. Wake up. Understand what's happening right under our nose. So let's start talking about the Chicano, right? But the most important, now we have to understand that the most profound and unanswered question of all time to the Chicano is, what is a Chicano? The conundrum, right? What is a Chicano? What is a Latino? What is a Hispanic? Aren't they all Mexican? It's time for an intellectual revolution, Chicano. It's time to start waking up. The time has come, the walrus said, to talk of many things. And most important to all of us is whether Chicanos have wings. Wake up, Chicano. Let's go. So what is a Chicano, right? We come from a place called Mexica. Mexica was an empire that ruled the land as far as the eye can see, from past New York to past Panama. And we had runners running that every day. We had warriors conquering all tribes every day. And we unified the Chicano people. Just like Shaka Zulu unified the African people. Just like Alexander the Great unified the European people. And then the list goes on and on. We could go to the Ming dynasty. We could go to the Qin dynasty. But today we're talking about the Chicano dynasty, or what could have been. So the Chicano comes from a place called Mexica. And at that point, we were called Mexicanos. Okay? So Mexicanos at some point got invaded by an evil culture that was willing to do anything for greed, right? For gold. They'll murder, they'll holocaust, they'll genocide anybody for that precious yellow gold, right? That's what Spain was. That's what Europe was at that time. They were gold. They were hungry. The Spanish Inquisition was at its best. They were killing people for all their gold. Even in Europe, that's what the European revisionist history will tell you, that they came and conquered Aslan, while the Spanish were conquering a lot more than Aslan. They were conquering the whole of Europe through something called the Spanish Inquisition. Read up on it, people. It's time for an intellectual revolution. Know where we came from so that we can know where we're going. So after the Chicano was conquered, and I use that term lightly, a lot of the Chicano migrated. Okay, this is what the historians are not going to tell you. They think we all stood there and were subjugated as slaves. No, that's not the case. when we realized, when a lot of the Eagle Knights and Jaguar Knights and the warrior culture of the Chicano people, when they realized that Moctezuma was going to sell them out like our Chicano leaders do us today, they left. You think they stood there? Huh? No. They left. Where did they go? Well, they went north. They went to a place what we call today North America. Although we were there already, where else are you going to go? Spaniards are not going to follow them. They didn't know how to get out of that jungle. They didn't know where they were going. Mexicanos did. So Mexicanos left. And the people that left were the warrior culture. That's why you see Chicanos today, we're all warriors. We're not wise men. We're not priests. We're not kings and queens. We're warriors. That's it, bottom line. So out of Mexica comes a people, and they migrate. And then, America is formed. Now understand, that's a whole other story, right? So once America is formed and this place, America is created. And then we lived there for some more years, subjugated as a people, until the 1960s. And then when the 1960s came, there was a Chicano movement. There was a civil rights movement. And our civil rights leaders, Corky Gonzalez, Tijerina, all those men and women that came before us, they condensed the word Mexicano and created the word Chicano out of that word. It's just a condensation of the word Mexicano people. And that's who the Chicano is. We're Mexicano. We're not Latino. We're not a language. We're not Hispanic. Hispania doesn't exist no more. So no, we're not Oompa Loompas from Oompa Land. That doesn't exist no more. When you come to America from Mexico, that means you're leaving Mexico and you're coming to America. And once you do that, you're saying, I want to be a Chicano, because Chicano is an American phenomenon, Chicano. It happened here in America. Mexicanos don't call themselves Chicanos. They call themselves Mexicanos. So Chicano is an American phenomenon. And it's here where we stand. That's our Aslan. So it's time to wake up, Chicano. It's time to know who you are. So that's the answer. That's who the Chicano is. So as a people, we find ourselves in 1960s. Chicano movement. And also at that time, there was an African-American movement, the black movement. And it seems like the black movement, man, they evolved. Martin Luther King. Okay, all these black leaders came out. And now we've seen a black president, right? Well, a half-black president. And they fought. And they sacrificed. And they died. All while our Chicano leadership got bought out. And were given jobs. And were given opportunity. And they left the Chicano bare. They left us lost in a forest of confusion since 1960. Since 1970. So where did our leaders go? What happened to our leaders? Well, I'm inviting them on the show today to tell us what happened to you. Where did you go? How did we become America's new slave culture? How come we can't get a president? The African-American community people, they're 13% of the American population. The Chicano is 17% of America's population, yet we have nowhere near their power. We're nowhere near getting a Chicano in the presidency, in the Oval Office. We have nowhere near their political, societal power. Why? Because we don't have no leaders. Because we didn't have nobody after the 60s to teach us and to tell us, and hey, this is what's happening. So now We're bumping into trees. We're bumping into walls. We don't know. We can't see. We don't have no idea. So today, the Chicano has a voice. Today, the Chicano is going to be heard. But that Chicano falls to you. The Chicano Chronicles podcast is yours, and you're going to do with it what you will. It can turn into this big sleeping giant that we've all heard of, or it can die a slow death the way our leaders did and the way our movement did. But that's all up to you, Chicano. I'm laying it at your feet. So you wake up today and we become a force. We become a voice. We become relevant. Or you can continue sleeping. You can continue wallowing in our ignorance and doing those jobs that nobody else will do. Continue changing diapers. Continue cleaning yards. Continue cleaning cars. Continue doing all the construction work. Continue cleaning toilets in the construction sites. Continue doing those jobs that nobody else wants to do. You keep on doing it. Or wake up. And let's start moving, people. Let's start walking together, standing each other, embracing one another, showing the power of the Chicano that was diminished a long time ago. So let's get moving. What's keeping us down, right? What's stopping us from moving forward? It's a little thing called racism. Now, I know Chicanos, this is the propaganda, right? This is where propaganda comes in, because propaganda has made you ignore racism. Chicanos, for some reason, don't like to talk about it. Because what? A victimhood? Machismo? You know? We don't like to cry? That's all propaganda, vato. That's all propaganda, people. Wake up. So now when you hear people say, I don't want to talk about racism. Oh, what racism? That's the tool that's keeping you down. That's the tool that's keeping you uneducated. That's the tool that's sending you to prison in mass numbers. We are the mass incarcerated. It's no longer the black man. Although they are, yeah, they're still being, they haven't come out of their mire completely. But us, we're not, we haven't even gotten our heads out of our mire. We're bad. We're oh my gosh, how can I explain to you guys? How can I wake you up, right? Other than look at the numbers. Start researching. Okay, this is an intellectual revolution. This is a revolution of the mind. It's time for us to start finding out the facts, the reality. Being lost in ignorance, it does nothing for you. So let's get educated. Let's start understanding what racism is. Now, you have to understand, Chicano, that racism has played a role in every facet of my life's experience as a Chicano in America. From education to gangs, how they were created, and now how they are perpetuated, to mass incarceration to inopportunity. You name it, racism played a part. Because of the current dilemma that's taking place in Hollywood, we're going to start there. But let me go back on racism, right? So racism was the reason I wasn't able, was the reason why we're not able to enjoy an advanced education. We're stopped at every step of the way. I like to use this analogy, right? When a white person comes out of high school, they shoot out that cannon. And they run around the track unabated. Okay? That's white privilege. Okay, that's without racism. When a Chicano or a black person comes out of high school, they come out with a lot of baggage, suspensions, detentions, all that stuff that prohibits them and retards their advanced educational life. When they come and they start running around that track, there's hurdles that they got to jump over. There's traps that they got to jump over. There's things in their way that they have to overcome. So as a white man runs just straight, full sprint around that track, you have hurdles to jump. You got lakes to negotiate. Understand that analogy. So racism has played a role in every aspect of my life. So, in my school, it was a white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed dean of students that sat across from me at the desk that kicked me out of high school on my 18th birthday. Told me that if I showed up at school, I was going to be arrested. No ifs, ands, or buts. So that's how racism plays a role in our life. Understand that racism is going to be our number one adversary. Racism is what's stopping us from moving forward. So understand that. So we can talk about racism, education, racism, mass incarceration, racism, inopportunity. Racism has to do with it all. Every one of those aspects. But in doing the TikTok, in starting the mass media, which we need profoundly, I started, everybody wanted, because of what happened to Ms. Barrera and Ms. Ortega, Hollywood kind of reared its ugly head right at the perfect time, just to let us know why they're treated like that, right? Everybody's speaking out, but what? It was the Mexicans, quote unquote, that are going to get fired, right? That's racism in America, people. That's a perfect example. So we're going to talk about racism in terms of Hollywood, right? Because I have stories to tell, and I can lend to that. But I can lend to mass incarceration because I've been incarcerated. I can lend to racism in education because I felt that racism. I was kicked out, like I told you. In my school, 98% Chicano. It was 98% white administrations, like it's happening today in 2024. We haven't even woke up to that. White administrations running all our schools, ruining our children's lives, ruining our children's educations in the most heinous and worst ways. And Chicanos don't wake up to that. We cannot wake up to that. Wake up, Chicano. We need Chicanos teaching our children. We need Chicanas running our administrations, our schools. So let's start working on that. But let's talk a little bit about Hollywood. Okay. I asked a young man the other day. I asked him, do you know that Hollywood didn't allow African Americans to play the reindeer games, prior to 1980s? In the 70s, there was 1 or 2 shows. In the 80s, there was 1 or 2 or 3 shows. In the 90s, there was 4. But before the 70s, there was nothing. There were no BET. There were no black producers, no black production companies. But propaganda has made us think, and has made the younger generation think that, oh, that wasn't part of America. Yeah, it is. Show me all the movies in the 1960s that were African American. Show me all the movie stars in the 1960s that were African American. So racism plays a huge role in Hollywood. In the 80s, because African Americans, you couldn't stop them. Michael Jackson, all the entertainment, all the singers, all the rap that started coming out. White people couldn't stop the ascendance of African American entertainment. They couldn't stop it. It was too much, especially with Michael Jackson, Prince, Oprah Winfrey. But the most important one, right, was Quincy. He's the one that opened all those doors. We don't have that. We don't have that Quincy Jones. We don't have that Chicano. We don't got that person. So our doors are all closed. So understand the African American experience that was happening prior to the 80s. That's where the Chicano's at right now. 17% of America, we can't get a show. I can't sell a script. They steal our stories. They steal our history, and they make it their own, or they distort it in such a way, again, that's going to make the Chicano look in a negative light. So in Hollywood, racism is rampant. It is in your face, and nobody's going to change it, Chicano, but the Chicano. The white people in Hollywood, they're not going to open the doors for us. The Jewish conglomerate, the Jew power, I don't buy into that because I don't, for one thing, I refuse to identify anybody by their religion. So that's the last time I'm ever going to say Jew. They're called Israelites, Israelis. That's where they're from. That's who they are. So is racism in the Israeli community, it's through the roof. They despise Chicanos. And I'm going to give you stories. I'm going to tell you. I'm not going to just sit here and say stuff. I've been trying to get into Hollywood for we're talking 20, 30 years. We're talking back when Dark Angel came out. That came out in 2000. So you can imagine I was soliciting that script and that idea in Hollywood long before that. But to give you an idea, we're going to go into the Dark Angel because that's going to be the tell all, right? That's going to be, there's no denying it. They did it. And now it's out there. They're never going to be able to pull that back, what they did to me. So during the 80s, the late 80s, there was a creator called Stephen J. Cannell, right? He created a lot of shows, but one of the shows that he created, 21 Jump Street. Everybody knows that, right? Johnny Depp. Out of that one, a spinoff from 21 Jump Street was a series called Booker. Okay, the Booker series. And I liked that series so much that I wrote to Stephen J. Cannell, told him that I wanted to be, right? No, and I'm going to AFI. I understand, gente. I went to American Film Institute in Hollywood for my basic screenwriting and my intermediate screenwriting classes. Completed those. And then for my advanced screenwriting, I went to Writers Boot Camp in Santa Monica for my advanced screenwriting. At that course, I was offered to get in a think tank because they recognize the skills, right? During that time, same time that Booker was out, a little later, I created Dark Angel. It was a character that was going to come on Booker, a friend of Booker's, blah blah blah, right? I liked the character so much that I expounded on him, created its own series. So that's how Dark Angel was created, from the Booker series, okay? The first thing that you learn in Hollywood being one of the most the most racist, I'd say, venues or industries in America, you learn real fast the exclusion that is included in that, right? So the first roadblock, the first gatekeeper that you run into as a writer, as a screenwriter in America, in the movie industry, is agents. You have to get an agent. Without an agent, and again, this is a ruse that white people use, and that they do this in America is amazing. That you can run an industry with the racism that they do, and it be all right. Nobody's like, what the heck did you just do? And I'm going to explain that to you right now, how they do things. It's amazing. It's amazing that nobody has stopped that from happening. But let me tell you the process, right? You have to get an agent or a manager, or you got to get somebody. And what they tell you when you call a production office, and I would suggest that you guys call and see for yourself what they're going to tell you. But what they say is, I'm sorry, we don't take any unsolicited material. What does that mean? In other words, you have to hire an attorney, or you got to convince an attorney that is in the industry, 98% white, okay, or Israeli. You got to convince them to solicit your material, okay? And that's where it ends. Doesn't even go past that. That's why you don't see no Chicano stories. That's why you don't see no Chicano movies. That's why you don't see no Chicano filmmakers. That's why you don't see no Chicano producers. That's why you don't see no Chicano nothing in Hollywood, because they've closed us out. They want to tell our stories. So when Steven Spielberg writes The Color Brown, he wrote The Color Purple, took that story away. Amistad, he took that. So now that he's taken all the African American stories, these Israeli producers and screenwriters, now they want to start telling the Chicano story, right? Joaquin Murrieta, Zorro, all these stories now and you're gonna see them come out now because they know they can hear me making a voice. There's a lot of things that I'm gonna talk about that are all of a sudden coming out. It's weird, but check it out. So that's it. No, you can't talk. We're not even going to talk to you unless somebody white represents you. And that's the case. That's the case everywhere. And I'm gonna show you something where they wrote that down. The only way you're gonna be able to do this money is to attach a white person to it. That's in writing, and I'm gonna show that to you later, right? That's gonna be our Hollywood thing. So what I've decided, Chicano, there's going to be segments in my show, the Chicano Chronicles podcast. That's not just going to be me talking. I'm going to have characters on there, and I'm going to have segments. And one of the segments I've decided to do is I'm going to tell you my 20, 30 years experience of Hollywood, because I've got some horrible stories. The most profound is what they did to the Dark Angel script, right? Let's go. So every episode, there's going to be a Hollywood story on racism and how they exclude the Chicano, the African American. Well, tell you the truth, I got a horrible story where even an African American production company. Now, white people will not write this, but African American people are brazen enough, and well, they got history. So I got a rejection slip where the black producer says that we're focusing on black stuff. He literally wrote that on an email. We're focusing on black material right now. Can you imagine if a white person wrote to a black screenwriter, sorry, but we're focusing on white content right now. I mean, we know that's the case, but they would never say that. They would never voice that. But they literally wrote that to me. An African-American producer. Oh, sorry, Mexican, but we're going to focus on black stuff right now. And I have that email, and you're going to see it. Okay? But today we're talking about the Dark Angel, my Dark Angel experience. That was my first script. Jeffrey Grode. Now, check this out. Jeffrey Grode was a producer at, or a screen something. He had a position in Fox Studios. And he was a professor, or he was the teacher right there at AFI during one of my classes, where I started writing the Dark Angel script. Now, I'm not saying that he has anything to do with it, because I almost know exactly who sold that script to Fox and how that happened. I got the numbers and I got the people. I still have all that stuff written down. Don't think I don't. As well as the original script. So that's my experience, right? So once I started going and soliciting for an agent, those doors are not open, even today. Whether you're a screenwriter or not, go into an agency, pick an agency. Now we're talking major agencies. There's William Morris, there's UTA. Go to the big ones, CCA. Go to the big ones, and say you're a Chicano writer and you speak to an agent and see what they tell you. Even today, they're not afraid. They're going to tell you, we don't take unsolicited material. You got to have a white person backing you up. If you're not white, you're not right in the Hollywood industry. So it's historical, and it's happening today, but it's just happening to brown people today. Black people today are even doing it to brown people today. Okay, it's not just white people excluding us, but if you look at the latest African-American superhero thing, they did give us a little shot of a superhero. That was an Aztec. Thank you, African-Americans. Now, if there are any African-American producers, and believe me, I've contacted them, but they're not going to give a Chicano a chance also. But if there are any out there that want good content instead of the 345th Spider-Man movie, or the 467th Iron Man movie, or the 375th Transformer movie, if you guys have room for one Chicano superhero, please call me, because we got one. Okay, it's called the Dark Angel. So that's that. So here we are, right? I couldn't get an agent, and again, you're going to hear those horror stories. They're pretty bad. Agents and managers and what they tell you and how they treat you, right? A lot of them won't even answer you. They won't even talk to you. They'll take your script, which happened with my Dark Angel script, and you'll never hear from them again until you're watching one of their movies and one of your sequences come out, or one of your scenes come out. This fallacy that Chicanos can't write. If we can't write, can you stop stealing our stuff? How about that? How about if we don't got what it takes, how about not producing our content. How about that? So after I couldn't get an agent in Hollywood, I said, a la madre, I'm going to go out and I'm going to sell it myself. So that's when I started going to studios, Fox Studios, Paramount Pictures, all these places, right? Now check this little story out. I'll tell you this right now because it wasn't just Fox. It was HBO. HBO offered me $20,000 or $40,000, 2 to 3 points, but I had to sell it outright. I couldn't use my name. They weren't giving me no credit, and we needed Chicanitos and Chicanitas, little Chicanos, young kids. They needed to start seeing Chicanos on the screen. That's what my thing was. We need to start seeing representation, ourselves represented in Los Angeles, California, in Hollywood. We need to see brown faces and brown writers and brown producers. They're not allowing that to happen. So back in the 80s, I said, well, I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to create the superhero. But it's not happening. So I went to production companies. Let me tell you this little story, right? So I sent it to Paramount Studios. And there's I guess he's the VP of production development, right? So his name is Brett King. And I sent it to Mr. King. And well, I didn't send him the script. I send the treatment first because I write from treatment, right? Treatment to script. So I sent him my treatment. His assistant, Kai, Kai, called me up. A young male guy calls me up and tells me, hey, Brett liked your story and he wants to set up a meet. When are you available? I'm available. Well, we can't do it today, but how about in 2 weeks on Friday, we'll have the meeting, we'll set up. No problem. Yeah, I'm jumping up for joy, right? I'm going to get in there because I know the viability of that script. The day before I was supposed to have that meeting, Kai calls me up quite flippantly. Hey, yeah, we made a mistake. We're gonna and he used my name. We're gonna send it to that other guy with your name. Nonsense. But I guess Brett King hadn't got the memo on don't give them opportunity, but he did before our meet. So that meeting was canceled, and so I said, no problem, Kai. Can you send back my treatment? Because I did the whole thing, you send in your self-addressed stamped envelope, all the 9 yards, right? 3 months later, 90 days, I remember, I'm never going to forget it. It took them 3 months to send me back my treatment. And that treatment was so frayed, the corners were warped, the pages it looks like Mr. King gave that treatment to every writer in the damn Paramount Studios so they could see what a good story looks like. There were penises drawn all over it. And I found out later that Paramount's known for having that community there, right? Which there's nothing wrong with it. I don't got nothing against men that like to draw penises on paper. So don't blow it out of context. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that's what I heard. I seen the penises. I put 2 to 2 together. So that was my experience with Paramount, right? So I kept on going to the studios. Rejection. Sometimes they didn't even answer me. And then my partner calls him up and says, they produced your show. I said, what? Yeah, Dark Angel's coming on Fox, on Channel 11. So I go home and I turn on Fox and I'm watching, waiting for the commercial. Sure enough, here comes Dark Angel with Jessica Alba. And it blew me away, holding my heart, right? So with the knowledge that I had and the evidence of me sending Dark Angel script and treatment to multiple production companies and agencies, I thought, this is going to be easy to prove. So I called Maldef and NCLR and I called all these people. I thought that Chicano was ready to fight this fight, right? No, they're not. Still today, they're not. That's why you don't see no Chicano, because we don't have those things set up in place. There's nobody fighting for us. Maldef is not fighting for us. National Council La Raza, they're not fighting for us. LULAC, they're not fighting for us. ACLU, they're not fighting for us. We've become America's new slave culture for a reason, Chicano. We're the lowest of the low for a reason. So wake up. So it culminated in me calling an organization called California Lawyers for the Arts. And so I called them. They're an organization that was going to help out struggling artists. Without no money, and we're eating soup from a can, right? Because we're poor. So they created an organization that was going to help these poor, destitute writers who were treated badly. And I called them up, and the lady there, after talking to her, and again, racism sets into place real quick, she told me that I would have to be in the room with my script in hand. I would have to see James Cameron buying that script and stealing it right in front of my eyes. And I still wouldn't be able to win that case. No court would convict anybody from Fox, is what she said. And that was the last time I tried to get recourse for my stolen script. That's my Hollywood story, people. And there's a whole bunch of them like it. And you're going to keep on hearing them so that we can wake up and we could go demand our place in Hollywood. And we could stop them from telling our distorted stories. Because we know Steven Spielberg is going to come out with The Color Brown. He's going to want to tell the story of the Chicano. You can imagine all the storylines that have been stolen from Chicano writers. Can you imagine? Wake up, Chicano. Wake up. And so racism plays a huge part in why the Chicano is where he's at, right? But number 2 on that list, Chicano, is inopportunity. As America's new slave culture, you cannot be successful. When America decided that they were going to relegate the Chicano to slave status, there were steps that had to be taken. Propaganda had to be put in place. And the most important thing to make sure that the slave was a slave is to not allow him opportunity. So inopportunity, not allowing us to be script writers. Because why? Because they need me to be a construction worker, which is exactly what happened. I had to go back to work because I couldn't fulfill my American dream of being a filmmaker. I had to delve into my trade, which was construction. So when I realized that I wasn't going to be accepted into Hollywood and there's these barriers that were going to stop anybody brown from succeeding in Hollywood, I said to myself, and I'm not messing around, Chicano. I said this literally. I said, I'm going to make my own company. I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to work my manual labor job. I'm going to create my own company. I'm going to get my own money and I'm going to make my own movies. I'm going to create my own avenue. And I did. I created my own company, people. Because that's what a Chicano is, right? So now I got my own construction company and I'm going to be successful, right? I'm going to make it. Racism isn't just in Hollywood, people. It's hindering us from becoming who we are in many different aspects of Americana. So even as business owners, we're not allowed to succeed. But let me give you that. Let me give you one of my stories, right? Let me tell you that experience of inopportunity. And it has to do with racism. So I as a company, what you do as a subcontractor is you bid to general contractors, and general contractors cover the whole job. They do electrical, concrete, wood. They do all the jobs, right? And then they hire subcontractors. So they'll hire a wood contractor to do the wood on the job. They'll hire a concrete contractor to do the concrete, and so on and so forth. So me as a subcontractor, I bid to the general contractor. And so whoever is the lowest bid, responsible lowest bidder, gets the job. So there was a company, I had been awarded a job, one of my first jobs. This would have helped my company grow. It would have helped my success. It would have just done great things for me, right? This was a car wash, $536,000 contract, mid-size, not big, not small. And the senior estimator from the company calls me up and says, we're going to be able to we're going to award you the contract. After jumping up and down and running around my house naked for about 2 minutes, I came back, thanked him. And so what's the process? He goes, the next couple of days, I'm going to send you a letter of intent. That's going to show you that we intend on awarding you this contract. And then after you get the letter of intent, we'll send you the contract. No problem. So it was all set in place. Great. Success, right? Here we come. About 10, 11 o'clock that night, the owner of the company, the namesake of the company, calls me up. And he tells me, we're not going to be able to give you that. We're not going to be able to award you that contract. And I was taken aback. I was like, what do you mean? Mike just told me that you guys are going to award me. He's going to send me the letter of intent. He goes, well, we're not going to be able to do it. We're going to have to go with somebody else. And what can I say, right? No problem. Hung up. First thing next morning, call Mike, senior estimator. Hey, Mike, what happened? He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, your boss just called me, owner of your company just called me and said that you guys are not going to be able to award me that contract. He goes, what are you talking about? I go, yeah, he called me last night, middle of the night, in the dark. He goes, I know nothing about that. He goes, let me call you back in 10 minutes. We hung up. He called me back 10 minutes later, down in the mouth, right? Hey, man, I'm sorry, but it looks like we're not going to give you that contract. And I never got it. And that's what's going to ruin my company now. I can't get a contract from any white general contractors. They've monopolized my construction, the construction that I do, and I'm done. So my company's going to go under, especially when they find out that I'm doing this podcast. I'm done, people. I'm done, Chicano. My my life's long work, my dream of becoming a business owner, that's over with because of racism and an opportunity. So this is just to give you an idea of my experience, Chicano, and understand that my experience is your experience. So I want you to write into the Chicano Chronicles, okay, and tell me your story. But I'm going to offer you that. Pretty soon we'll be doing the normal podcast where it's visual. I want Chicanos to come on. I want to start telling your story. I want to hear these stories because I know I'm not the only one going through them. So Chicano, we're not going to be handed our rights on a silver platter. White and black people in power are not going to advocate on behalf of your children. You're going to have to do that. Time to wake up. Time to stand up. Time to take our place in society and start living out our American dream. But nobody is going to just hand it to us. Understand that. Chicano. Chicana. I dream of a place where Chicanos rule the land as far as the eye can see. I dream of a place that was unmatched at the time. Even Cortez said that Venice had nothing on Tenochtitlan. Chicano, Chicana. I dream of a people, a beautiful people, of dark black hair, brown skin, brown eyes, emperors, empresses, the jaguar and eagle knight, running free, unabashed. It's time we went back to that in our New Aslan, right here in America. It's time we spread our wings. It's time to unite. So wake up, Chicano. The time has come. This is Emiliano Villa, and you've been listening to the Chicano Chronicles podcast.